A genome revealed his name, Shaun Daniel Brauner, missing since 1986. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. The summer of 1986. Suburban California. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and hot asphalt. Kids played outside until the streetlights came on. It was a time when parents believed the world was still safe. But for one boy, that safety was an illusion. His name was Shaun Daniel Brauner, and he would soon vanish into thin air. Shaun was only 14. He was quiet, a little shy. He had a smile that seemed to carry secrets. He loved music, riding his bike, and hanging around with friends from school. His teachers said he was bright but often distracted, like his mind lived somewhere else. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't rebellious. He was just a normal boy. And yet, on that fateful day in 1986, he walked away and never came home. His last known movements were ordinary. So ordinary, in fact, they could have belonged to anyone. The morning began like any other. His mother remembered his voice at breakfast. He ate quickly. She said he seemed restless, like something was pulling at him. Later, a neighbor saw him near a corner store. He might have bought a soda, or maybe candy. The details blurred as memory faded over time. No one knew those moments would be the last glimpse of him alive. By evening, his family was worried. Shaun always came home. He wasn't the type to vanish. He wasn't the type to rebel. The sun set. Darkness fell. His mother's panic grew. Something was wrong. When night came without him, the alarm bells rang. His mother called friends. None had seen him. She drove the streets, checked parks, checked alleys. Every shadow looked like him. Every silhouette sparked false hope. Then came the call to police. But in 1986, police often treated missing teens differently. Many officers believed in the runaway theory. A teen missing? Probably ran away. He'd be back in a day or two. That's what they told his mother. But she knew. She knew her son. And she knew something terrible had happened. The first hours are critical in any disappearance. But for Shaun, those hours slipped away. Police filed the report. They asked questions. But they didn't rush. No Amber Alerts existed then. No social media. No instant broadcast to millions. Just posters, word of mouth, and a family begging for attention. Shaun's photo went up on telephone poles. Missing. Have you seen him? But leads were thin. Witnesses were uncertain. One person thought they saw him walking near a wooded area. Another swore they saw him talking to a man in a car. None of it was solid. And as the days passed, hope began to crumble. The neighborhood buzzed with speculation. Some said he'd run away, maybe to escape, maybe chasing adventure. Others whispered darker things, that he'd been taken, that he'd been targeted. The family heard it all. Each rumor was a knife, each whisper a wound, and still no Shaun. His mother stopped sleeping. Every knock at the door sent her heart racing. Was it Shaun? Was it police with news? But the knocks were always wrong. Friends drifted away. People stopped asking. Life went on for everyone else. But not for his mother. For her, time froze in 1986. Every day became a battlefield. Every night a prison of grief. Weeks became months. Months became years. The trail vanished just like Shaun had. No ransom note. No body. No crime scene. Nothing. It was as if he had dissolved into thin air. Detectives cycled in and out. Each one reviewed the old file. Each one hit the same wall. No evidence. No answers. And eventually the world forgot Shaun Daniel Brauner. But his family never did. What's worse than losing a child? Not knowing what happened to them. Every holiday his chair sat empty. Every birthday, a candle was lit in vain. His mother refused to give up. She kept his room intact. She spoke his name. She prayed for answers. But the years marched on, relentless and cruel. By the 1990s, the case was barely mentioned. By the 2000s, it was just another cold case in a dusty drawer. Shaun's photo yellowed. His memory faded from the public. Yet in silence, something was waiting. Because Shaun had not vanished completely. His body had been found years earlier, unidentified, at John Doe. But in 1986, technology couldn't unlock the truth. DNA databases didn't exist. Forensic genealogy was science fiction. So his remains lay in storage, waiting for the future to catch up. The genome doesn't lie. It holds secrets. It whispers names across decades. And one day, long after hope had dimmed, Shaun's genome would finally speak. But in 1986, all anyone knew was that a boy had walked out the door and vanished. His case was left in the dark. A mother was left with empty arms. And the silence grew louder with each passing year. The days after Shaun vanished were unbearable. His mother's world cracked open. Every night she sat by the phone. Every sound outside made her heart jump. Car doors, footsteps, voices. She thought maybe, just maybe, he would come back. But he didn't. His bed stayed empty, his shoes untouched. The house was too quiet. The silence was a scream. She walked through his room, touching the things he left behind. His school books, his bike leaning in the garage, his clothes folded neatly. She whispered, "Where are you, Shaun?" But the walls gave no answer. She called the police again and again. Each time, the same words, "We have no new leads." Felt like they had given up already. The officers hinted that maybe he'd left on purpose. A runaway, just a teenage phase. But his mother shook her head. She knew better. Shaun wasn't that kind of boy. Something had happened to him. Every dismissal felt like betrayal. Every shrug from police cut her deeper. She was fighting for her son's life, but it seemed she was fighting alone. First, neighbors helped. They searched the woods, the parks, the riverbanks. They passed out flyers. They made calls. But as weeks passed, their energy faded. Some grew uncomfortable. Some whispered cruel things. Maybe he ran away. Maybe there's more to the story. It was easier to believe Shaun had left by choice. That way they could sleep at night. For the family, it was torture. Not only had they lost Shaun, they were losing the people around them too. Grief gnawed at her day and night. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. Her face grew pale, her eyes hollow. She barely recognized the person in the mirror. She clung to hope, but hope was heavy. She carried it like a stone on her back. Every knock at the door, every unknown phone call, her heart jumped, only to break again. Her world revolved around a single question. Where is my son? Shaun's disappearance didn't just break his mother. It fractured the entire family. His siblings lived in fear. If Shaun could vanish, maybe they could too. The house grew colder, conversations shorter, arguments flared, emotions boiled. Grief doesn't unite everyone. Sometimes it tears people apart. His father tried to stay strong, but inside he was crumbling too. Work felt meaningless. Meals were silent. Home no longer felt like home. The family searched relentlessly. They put up flyers until their hands bled. They chased every lead, no matter how small. One caller swore they saw a boy like Shaun in another city. The family drove hours, only to find it wasn't him. Another tip suggested he was being held against his will. Police checked. Nothing. Every false lead was another dagger. Each hope crushed harder than the last. Still, they searched, because what else could they do? Years passed, but whispers never stopped. Runaway. Drugs. Maybe he didn't want to be found. His mother hated those words. They weren't true, but she couldn't silence them. Even friends started to distance themselves. No one wanted to sit in a house filled with grief. No one wanted to face that kind of pain. So the family grew more isolated. Just them, and the ghost of Shaun. Christmas was the hardest. One less stocking. One less smile around the table. His birthday was worse. Cake with his name on it. Candles no one blew out. The family kept celebrating him. But each year it hurt more. Time didn't heal. Time deepened the wound. By the 1990s, police had moved on. The file sat in a drawer, gathering dust. Detectives changed. Priorities shifted. Shaun's name was barely spoken at the station anymore. To the world, he was gone. To his family, he was everything. They begged for help, wrote letters, called anyone they could, but answers never came, and slowly despair set in. She kept Shaun's photo everywhere, in her wallet, in her car, by her bed. She never let the world forget him. She spoke his name every day. She told anyone who would listen, "My son didn't run away. He was taken. Someone knows what happened." Some called her obsessed. Some called her delusional. But she didn't care. She was his mother, and mothers don't forget. As the 2000s arrived, new technology changed everything. DNA databases were forming. Forensic genealogy was on the horizon. But for Shaun's family, none of that mattered yet. All they knew was the ache of waiting. They had no idea his body had been found. No idea he was listed as an unidentified John Doe. No idea science would one day reveal the truth. For them, it was just endless silence. After decades of pain, grief became a part of daily life. It wasn't sharp anymore. It was heavy, like a stone chained to the chest. Shaun's mother aged quickly, her face carved with lines of sorrow. Her voice grew quieter, but she never stopped asking, never stopped searching. Her life became defined by two words: missing child. By the late 2000s, something shifted. More families of missing persons were getting answers. DNA was solving mysteries once thought unsolvable. Could it solve Shaun's case too? The family didn't know, but hope flickered again. A dangerous hope, because hope is a double-edged sword. Can keep you alive, but it can also destroy you. Shaun's genome was waiting. It sat in a lab, unmatched, silent, but it wouldn't stay silent forever. Decades after he vanished, science would finally catch up, and the truth would come crashing in. The family that once drowned in grief would soon face the devastating answer they had begged for. But answers don't always bring peace. Sometimes they bring more questions. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. For decades, he was just a number, a body with no name, a file in a cold cabinet marked unidentified. In 1986, not long after Shaun vanished, a body was found. It was young, male, but it couldn't be identified. The police called him John Doe. He was placed in a morgue. A report was written, a case number assigned, then silence. The boy's remains were eventually buried. Another nameless soul in a graveyard. Few knew his file even existed, but deep within him, a secret remained. Every cell carried the truth. His DNA. DNA is a witness that never forgets. It doesn't fade. It doesn't lie. In the 1980s, DNA testing was primitive. Too slow. Too limited. Police couldn't imagine what it would become, so they kept samples. Tissue, blood, bone. Fragments of the boy's genome were preserved. They sat in storage for years, decades, waiting. Science wasn't ready yet, but one day it would be. By the 2010s, the world had changed. Millions of people were sending DNA kits to companies. Ancestry, 23andMe. Others, they wanted to learn their heritage, find family connections, even trace health risks. But those databases became more than family trees. They became maps for solving crimes. Cold cases cracked open, killers unmasked, missing persons identified. Forensic genealogy was born. And Shaun's DNA, the DNA of John Doe, was about to speak. In 2022, a small team of investigators decided to revisit old unidentified remains. Files forgotten, cases abandoned. Among them, the boy from 1986. Samples were pulled, DNA extracted. The data was run through forensic genealogy databases. First, nothing. Then, hits appeared. A cluster of relatives, cousins, distant connections, pieces of a puzzle forming. The closer they looked, the clearer the picture became. Investigators traced the family tree. Every branch led closer to one person. A boy missing since 1986. The genome was whispering his name. Shaun Daniel Brauner. The John Doe was Shaun. The boy who vanished was finally found. After decades of silence, he had a name again. When police called the Brauner family, the world stopped. The voice on the other end said words they'd waited a lifetime to hear. "We believe we've identified your son." His mother's knees buckled. Tears poured. It was the moment she both feared and prayed for. Shaun was no longer missing, but he was gone. The finality hit like a hammer. All those years of searching, hoping, ended in one sentence. The family asked, "How did he die?" Police couldn't give a clear answer. The body had been too far gone. Time had erased too much. The genome gave his name, but not his story. That silence was almost cruel. They knew who he was, but not what happened. Did someone take him? Did someone kill him? Or was it something else? The truth was out there, but the genome could only whisper so much. Shaun's identification reignited the case. Detectives dusted off old files, witness statements, tips long forgotten. People who once dismissed the case began to care again. The media picked it up. Missing boy identified after 36 years. For the first time in decades, Shaun's name was in headlines. He wasn't forgotten anymore, but with recognition came questions. Questions no one had answers for. Shaun's mother finally had closure, but it wasn't peace. She cried for the boy she lost, but also for the years stolen, the birthdays missed, the memories never made. His siblings were shaken too. All their childhood fears came rushing back. The nightmare had ended, but the pain was alive again. They could no longer imagine Shaun alive somewhere. Now they had to face the truth. He had been gone all along. Shaun's story showed the world something powerful. That DNA never stops speaking. That even decades later, truth can surface. The genome solved what people couldn't. It gave identity back to the nameless. It turned a John Doe into Shaun Daniel Brauner. But DNA can't answer everything. Can't describe the fear he felt. Can't say who last saw him. Can't name the hand that hurt him, if one did. That part of the story remains locked in silence. The team that identified Shaun didn't stop there. They pushed harder. They wanted to know how he died. They wanted to know who was responsible. Every scrap of evidence was re-examined. Every lead rechecked. But time is the enemy of truth. Memories fade. Records vanish. People die. Shaun's case was a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Still, investigators refused to quit. If DNA could reveal his name, maybe it could reveal more. Behind every unidentified child, there lingers a dark possibility. What if Shaun was murdered? What if his disappearance wasn't chance, but choice? Someone else's choice. Detectives began to dig through other cases from the 1980s. Other missing children. Other unsolved murders. Were they connected? Or was Shaun's case a tragic accident? The genome gave identity, but not cause, not justice. When Shaun's name hit the news, the public was shaken. People asked, how could it take this long? How could a child vanish in 1986 and only be named in 2022? The answer was chilling. Because technology wasn't ready. Because cases were shelved. Because time is merciless. But now, forensic genealogy was changing everything. Families once left in the dark were finally seeing light. Shaun was one of many, but his story carried a weight that spread far beyond his family. The cemetery where his remains lay was no longer anonymous. His gravestone was updated, from unknown to Shaun Daniel Brauner. A name, a life, a boy who mattered. For his mother, that meant everything. He wasn't just lost anymore. He was Shaun, and now the world would know him too. Shaun's identification wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new search. Who saw him last? Who knows what happened that night? Why did it take so long to find him? The genome gave them a name. Now the family wanted a face, a suspect, the truth. Because naming Shaun was only half the battle. The fight for justice was just beginning. The case of Shaun Daniel Brauner is not just about loss. It's about the power of science. It's about the families who wait decades for answers. And it's about the haunting question that remains. What really happened to Shaun? The genome spoke, but the story it told was incomplete. And the next chapter would reveal the deeper darkness. A darkness that had been hiding in plain sight for nearly 4 decades. Shaun Daniel Brauner finally had a name. But names aren't answers. They're only beginnings. The genome had spoken. It identified him, but it didn't explain how he died, or who, if anyone, killed him. And those questions were heavier than ever. For Shaun's mother, the news was bittersweet. She no longer had to wonder if he was alive, but she now knew he was gone. She couldn't stop asking, why? Why did her son vanish that night in 1986? Why did it take 36 years to find him? And who, if anyone, was responsible? Her tears weren't just for his death. They were for the silence, for the gap where truth should be. With his name revealed, detectives dove back into the past. They reopened files. They tracked down old witnesses. They re-examined scraps of evidence once dismissed. But it had been decades. People had moved. Memories had faded. Some witnesses were dead. Still, there were whispers in the records. Fragments that didn't add up. The night Shaun disappeared wasn't simple. It was full of shadows. Shaun was last seen in the summer of 1986. He was only a boy, young, trusting. One moment he was there, the next gone. Neighbors remembered seeing him near a gas station. Others said he was with a group of teenagers. But the stories conflicted. No one agreed on what happened. Police at the time assumed he ran away. It was easy to close the file with that label. But his mother never believed it. And now the DNA proved her right. Investigators built theories, each one darker than the last. Theory 1. Abduction. Shaun may have been lured into a car. Children in the 80s were easy prey. Strangers with promises. Strangers with lies. Theory 2. Someone he knew. Abductors often aren't strangers. They're familiar faces. Friends of the family. Neighbors. Even relatives. Theory 3. A tragic accident. Maybe it wasn't murder. Maybe it was an accident. And someone panicked. Instead of calling for help, they hid the truth. Each theory was terrifying. Each one tore open old wounds. But there were no clear answers. Just possibilities. The location of Shaun's remains raised red flags. It wasn't far from where he was last seen. So why wasn't he found sooner? Some said police never searched hard enough. Others believed he had been moved later. Forensic evidence was limited, but certain signs suggested his death wasn't natural. There were hints of trauma, hints that pointed to foul play, but nothing was certain. Only shadows, only questions. To understand Shaun's disappearance, you have to remember the 1980s. It was the era of stranger danger. Posters of missing kids were everywhere. Faces printed on milk cartons. Children vanished at alarming rates. Some were runaways, but many were taken. Communities lived in fear. Parents locked doors. Kids were told never to talk to strangers. Shaun's case was part of that terrifying wave. One boy lost in a storm of thousands. But unlike most, his name would one day return. Shaun's mother couldn't shake a thought. What if someone they knew was involved? She remembered people who acted strangely after his disappearance. Neighbors who avoided her. Friends who changed their stories. One in particular haunted her. A man who had been close to Shaun. Too close. But without evidence, suspicion meant nothing. Police noted her concerns. But the trail was cold. Colder than ice. The genome gave Shaun's name. But investigators wanted more. They turned to new technology. Isotopic testing. Bone analysis. Methods that could reveal where Shaun had been before his death. Tiny chemical signatures in his remains might tell a story. Where he traveled. What he ate. Even if he'd been kept in a hidden location. Every scrap of data was studied. Every possibility explored. And some findings hinted that Shaun hadn't died right away. That maybe he was alive longer than anyone thought. The implication was chilling. Had he been held captive? Once the story broke, the media descended. Genome reveals missing boy's identity. Headlines spread like wildfire. Reporters wanted interviews. TV producers called. True crime shows came knocking. Shaun's family was torn. They wanted awareness. But they also wanted privacy. This was their child. Not a spectacle. Still, the attention meant something important. Pressure. Pressure on investigators. Pressure on the system. And pressure often cracks cases wide open. People from Shaun's hometown began to speak. Memories resurfaced. Some admitted they had seen things back then but were too scared to talk. One woman swore she saw Shaun the night he disappeared. She remembered him with someone older, someone who didn't belong. Her story was vague, but it was enough to raise suspicion again. The case wasn't just science anymore. It was memory, emotion, and fear. If Shaun was murdered, then the killer may have walked free for decades, lived a normal life, started a family, blended into society. The idea haunted the community. It made everyone look over their shoulders. It made people question their neighbors, because killers don't always look like killers. Sometimes they look ordinary. Sometimes they smile at you in the grocery store. And maybe, just maybe, Shaun's killer was still out there. Shaun's case became more than a story. It became a ghost, a reminder of the darkness that lurked in small towns. For his siblings, the ghost followed them everywhere. It was in the empty chair at dinner, in the silence at Christmas, in every picture missing his face. The genome had revealed his name, but the ghost still whispered. What really happened? Detectives worked quietly, hours spent digging through boxes of old evidence. Every photograph studied, every report reread. They knew time was against them, but they also knew time had a way of breaking people. If someone had kept a secret since 1986, maybe now, after decades, they'd slip, say too much, confess to the wrong person. So investigators waited, watched, listened, because sometimes the truth comes when you least expect it. Shaun's mother went public. She stood before cameras. Her voice cracked as she begged, "If anyone knows anything, please say it now. My boy deserves the truth." Her words broke hearts, but they also lit fires. The case wasn't just about science. It was about a mother's love, and that love refused to die. Shaun's name was back, but justice was missing. The genome had given the first half of the story. The rest was buried in silence. Every theory remained possible. Every suspect still a shadow. The case was alive again, but the answers were still locked away. And as investigators dug deeper, they began to see patterns. Patterns that pointed to something far darker. Something that might tie Shaun's death to more than just one boy. The truth wasn't just hidden. It was tangled in a web no one expected. The genome had given Shaun his name, but the name wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something darker. The past was rising. The truth was clawing its way out. And it wasn't pretty. Detectives pulled every file apart. Every page. Every word. Patterns emerged. Connections that had been missed in 1986. There were other cases. Other boys who vanished. Other families left with empty chairs. And the timelines matched. The locations overlapped. It was as if Shaun's case wasn't isolated. It was part of something bigger. The whispers of the town began to circle. Some said it was a stranger who took him, a drifter, someone passing through, but others weren't convinced. Shaun's last moments felt too personal, too precise. If it was random, why him? Why there? Why then? The answer began to point inward, not outside the community, but inside, someone they all knew. In the lab, technology was at work again. New DNA testing, new chemical analysis. Bone fragments revealed traces. Traces of substances not common in nature. Substances linked to human environments. Basements, sheds, hidden rooms. It meant Shaun hadn't just vanished into the night. He had been somewhere, held, kept, and the horror grew. He may have lived for days, even weeks. The silence wasn't instant. It was prolonged. Detectives faced the darkest question of all. Had Shaun been held captive by someone he trusted? The idea was unbearable, but the evidence leaned that way. Neighbors, family friends, even church members. Everyone was back under suspicion. The safe world of 1986 wasn't safe anymore. It was rotten at the core. One name surfaced again and again. A man who lived near Shaun's home. He had been questioned back then. But there wasn't enough to charge him. He was friendly, helpful, always around, but his story had holes. Small ones, the kind only visible years later. He had moved away soon after Shaun disappeared, started over, built a new life, too convenient, too clean. Detectives began to wonder if he had been hiding in plain sight. An elderly woman came forward. She remembered the night Shaun vanished. She had seen him, not alone. Her memory was sharp despite the years. Shaun was with someone older, someone she recognized. The name she spoke chilled investigators. It was the same man whose file they had reopened. Coincidence? Or confirmation? Detectives searched properties linked to the man. One in particular caught their eye. A house he had once rented. The basement was strange. Sections sealed. Walls thicker than normal. Inside they found traces. Old stains. Fibers. Objects that didn't belong. Time had destroyed much of the evidence. But enough remained to suggest the unthinkable. Shaun had been there, at least for a while. The room was a prison, and Shaun was its prisoner. When detectives told Shaun's mother, she broke. The idea that her son had suffered was unbearable. But it was also closure. She finally knew. Her grief turned to rage. Rage at the man who had lived free. Rage at a system that had missed him. Her words cut through the air like knives. He lived his life. My son didn't. That's not justice. The man was tracked down. But justice was cruel. He was already dead. Gone years before Shaun's name was revealed. There would be no trial. No confession. No prison cell. Just silence. For Shaun's family, it was a second loss. The truth had surfaced. But justice had slipped away. Even without a living suspect, the case changed everything. The Genome had pulled back the curtain. It had revealed a killer who thought he escaped. The community reeled. People asked how they had missed it. How someone so ordinary could hide something so monstrous. It was a lesson. Evil doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it waves. Sometimes it lives next door. Shaun's case became a symbol, a turning point in forensic history. It showed that no case is too old. No secret too buried. Science will catch up. The Genome gave Shaun his name, and in doing so, it gave other families hope. If his truth could be revealed after 36 years, maybe theirs could too. Shaun's siblings spoke publicly for the first time. They weren't angry at the science. They were grateful. They said Shaun had been voiceless for too long, and now, at last, he had spoken. Through DNA, through science, through persistence. Their message was simple. Never stop asking. Never stop fighting. Never stop searching. The answers are out there. Shaun's story doesn't end neatly. There's no courtroom drama. No sentence passed. But there is truth. And truth is powerful. His name is no longer lost. His life is no longer a mystery. And while justice may never come in a courtroom, it comes in another way. In the fact that his story is told. That his name is spoken. That he is remembered. Shaun Daniel Brauner's case is more than one boy's tragedy. It's a warning, a lesson, a reminder that time doesn't erase truth, that secrets rot in the dark, that every name deserves to be known. Shaun's was, and though it took decades, the silence was finally broken. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.